I would like to take a moment before we get into today's main episode and to talk about my sponsor for the podcast. Podmatch is a new podcasting site dedicated to all podcasters. The platform helps hosts get connected with potential guests to appear on their show, as well as allow guests to find podcasts that will give them a chance to share their story. Podmatch offers many tools to help organize your page, from to-do lists to episode planning to potentially appearing on a leaderboard. Podmatch has it all. The best part, you have the potential to get paid. And who doesn't like to get paid from home? I like to. With an easy sign up, you can start connecting with podcasters and guests immediately. I have been a part of Podmatch since the beginning of May, and I have got to say that it was the best decision I've ever made because Podmatch helps your podcast grow. It helps you get connected with people that have very interesting, very compelling background stories that are just waiting for their story to be shared. So if you are a host or guest and would like to start building professional relationships, explore more opportunities, and have your story shared, I highly suggest that you sign up with Podmatch today by going to joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to start expanding your network in seconds. I would like to give another huge thank you to Podmatch for sponsoring this episode. Now on to our main episode, and again, you can sign up at joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to begin your podcasting journey today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lethal Venom Podcast, the show where we talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth, no lies told. Today, we have a special guest who has a huge career ahead of him. His name is Julian Raven. He is a British born, Marbella, Spain raised American artist, author, and First Amendment litigant whose name has become linked with one of the most enduring free speech battles of the last decade. His journey began in 2015 when a portrait of him and then candidate Donald Trump, which, as we all know, to him was a bold, larger than life painting he created, not just as a political statement, but as a prophetic image of what he believed was about to unfold in American history. When the picture got submitted for exhibition at the Smithsonian Institution's National Portrait Gallery, he encountered what would become a long and ongoing legal and constitutional confrontation. And the portrait was rejected personally by the Smithsonian director, whom a federal judge later described as having acted in a way that was odiously partisan. So I do not want to read the whole introduction because I want Julian to tell this story from start to finish because it's such an impactful story. If I read it, it'd just be me reading his life story. So, Julian, I appreciate you for coming on the show, and I can't wait to hear this interesting story. And I think this story will be interesting knowing that Donald Trump's our president again, and so it kind of would be reigniting a flame. So I'm excited for this conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Well, thank you, Noah, for having me on. And it certainly is an interesting story, and there's lots to it. And I think a lot of surprises for you and your audience as well.
So take us from the beginning, kind of take us back to 2015. I guess explain how this opportunity came to you and how this actually all unfolded.
Well, I'll start here. I'm standing in my art studio in upstate New York as I speak to you. It's in a small city called Elmira in upstate New York, in between sort of New York City and Buffalo. We're sort of bang smack in the middle of the state towards the west. Elmira is famous because of its greatest resident, which was Mark Twain. Although he wasn't born here, he lived here and died here and is buried here. And few folks would know that. And so there is a great history of this great author that his studio, which was moved, is about 500 yards to my left on the campus of Elmira University. And so it's pretty cool that we're on Elmira College, that we have that heritage here. So that's just a sort of place where I am and where I was, again, 10 years ago now, which is remarkable. It's amazing how time just sort of merges into one blob. And we're still on this journey. So 10 years ago, 2015, in 2014, I'll step back a little bit. We had as a New Yorker, we had heard that Donald Trump was interested in running for governor of the state. And we thought anything better than what we had at that time. And so he showed interest. And I thought, knowing not too much about him, but I'd lived in New York City for a while, 6 years back in the late 90s. And Trump was a phenomenon back there, larger than life character, business, buildings. You could drive down the West Side Highway and see a little sign on the side of the road where it says Donald Trump has paid for the cleaning of the next mile, to continuing on and looking off to your left and seeing massive high rises going up with the name draped in banners all over. So quite a personality. Myself being an immigrant to the country, I knew the story, from different stories, whether it was from Home Alone, whether it was just my mother wanting to take me for coffee at Trump Tower early when I had arrived in the United States. There's a wonderful story there as well, which I won't get into now, but you can read. I want to just introduce this story is in my book, which is called Odious and Cerberus, An American Immigrant's Odyssey and His Free Speech Legal War Against Smithsonian Corruption. And that book you can buy anywhere in major booksellers, online, Amazon, Odious and Cerberus. And that sort of catalogs this journey that I'm on, sort of the first 7 years. I'm still on it now, a decade later. So in 2015, June 15th, 2015, or June 16th, I believe it was, and Donald Trump makes the historic announcement coming down the escalator at Trump Tower. And I was like, wow, he had tried to run for governor, it fell apart. And it was like, okay, we didn't hear much more. And then suddenly he's running for president. That was quite something. And I was intrigued because of the things he was saying. And immediately I was responding positively because he was saying out loud the things that a lot of people wanted to say or hear, and most politicians were afraid to say. So to me, it was very intriguing. And then as somebody who is an artist, I knew the story of the Obama Hope poster very well. Do you remember that poster? I'm not sure how old you are now, but do you remember the election of Obama in '09 and 13 and 12?
I was very young when Obama was president. And in 2009 I was 7, and in 2012 I was 10.
Okay,
So
so
I was
yeah,
fairly young.
fairly well. There was a poster, a very iconic image created by an artist by the name of Shepard Fairey, and it was commissioned by a political activist by the name of Yossi Sergeant. And this image, this political poster, the Hope poster, it's called, became a massive artistic expression of the campaign of Barack Obama, the Hope message, and it really became a major contributor towards moving the youth, college age students, people who are art friendly towards, a candidate and towards voting for Barack Obama. So it was a massive contributor towards his win. That was 2008. So that poster, then I knew about it. And in 2015, I was like, well, I know this story very well. Trump's already causing all sorts of a firestorm with what he's saying. And I was like, maybe it would be a good idea to paint a picture. I could be the first one, because at that time, most people were shying away from this man. And I thought about it. And then I actually was sitting down at my desk one day and listening to, not, I wasn't watching, it was just like an audio playing through my computer. And I have in my head like a picture, like a vision, and I see like ticker tape words going across the screen of my mind that said unafraid and unashamed, and then a picture of a falling American flag on a flagpole falling towards the ground. And then this eagle swoops in, a bald eagle swoops in and snatches the flag just before it hits the ground. And so it was like a symbol of this sort of rescue, this saving of America. And I had his face in my mind. I had the bald eagle. I had this flag, and that was pretty much it. But that image, it stuck with me, and it didn't, and it was like present with me every day. And I'm in my art studio like I am now, and I'd be thinking about this image, and then I began to think and say, maybe I should paint a painting of this. And then I'm like, no, maybe my art career was very young at the time. I had returned to painting somewhat, you could say, late in life. I had a career as a professional cabinet maker, woodworker, furniture designer, and builder. I'd built for years, and so I was always yearning to paint. So I'd started painting back in 2008, 2009, and then really pressing into it later on into 2015 was like early days for me getting serious. I knew it would prejudice me greatly in the art world if I was to paint a painting of everyone, of this guy that people were already. It was just, the fire was huge. So I dilly
Mhm.
dallied, and I kept delaying and wondering, and it went on for weeks, like 4 or 5 weeks. I think about the sixth week. It was June 16, so I'm into the beginning of August, and I'm sitting at my computer at home, and I'm like, you know what? I've got to get on with this. I've just got to. This is a. I've just got to do this. It's the image was like there, glowing in my head, and I couldn't shake it, and it was like compelling me to just get on. So I sit down, and on my computer, I'm researching eagles and when they snatch fish out of the water, because I needed an eagle snatching this flag, and so I'm researching and studying and beginning to make, I was getting screenshots from my computer and taking little pieces of the bird and trying to construct the bird that I could then later draw and turn it into a painting. And my daughter at the time, her name is Victoria. She was, I think, 13, and she walks in to my office and she looks over my shoulder and she's like, "Dad, what are you doing? Are you making a sculpture of an eagle?" Because I was working in steel at the time in my studio. I was having a lot of fun, excuse me, welding. And I said, "No, sweetheart." I said, I didn't say what I was thinking. No one knew for the last 6 weeks. And I'm like, "No, I'm just gonna, it's gonna be a painting." And that's all I said. And she turns around and says, "Dad, why don't you paint the painting of the eagle and give it to Donald Trump so when he becomes president, he can hang it in the White House?" Now, I had discussed politics at home with my family. It was a conversation, but I had not discussed my idea and this idea about painting or nothing. So she's out of nowhere says, "Paint a painting of the eagle, give it to Donald Trump, so when he becomes president, he can hang it in the White House." Well, I stood staring at her, and she was just a pretty young girl. She shrugged her shoulders and turned around and walked out the room. And I was like, whoa. I was like, that to me was like, well, I've dilly dallied. And then my daughter says this very direct pronouncement to me: "When he becomes president." What does she know? 13-year-old kid. And the next morning, this is when things really became like remarkable for me. Very early, I turn on the news on my computer and I'm looking at CNN, and there is a link to a video. It says it's of Donald Trump, and the title was, "I had a visitor this morning." And I click on the video, and it starts to roll, and there is Donald Trump standing in his office. That morning, they'd had a photo shoot with Time Magazine. CNN did the reporting, but Time Magazine did the photography. And Donald Trump standing in his office with a bald eagle perched on his arm. And that's a very famous photograph from that really beginning. This is again August of 2015, and I nearly fell off my chair. I thought someone was actually playing a joke on me. I thought I was staring at the screen like this is photoshopped. Here I've had this burning image in my head for 6 weeks. The
Mhm.
night before, my daughter says what she says, and now the next morning, and it was like, oh my God, this guy is going to win. This guy is going to become president. This is it. This painting is a commission. This is something I was blown away. I jumped up, got into my car, and I drove down to my studio where I am, and I started building this massive 7 feet by 15 feet stretched canvas. And I had only done a few little thumbnails on the computer to start painting. I didn't even really know what I was doing. I just started painting because I was so thrilled. I was so shocked, and my world was impacted. Like I could not just stop thinking. And this, I was basically overwhelmed by a spirit of inspiration that went on for the next 6 weeks, morning, noon, and night. I didn't do anything. I disappeared. I didn't go out. I didn't see anyone. I didn't speak to anyone. Hardly spoke to my mother, who, other than my family, was always getting a call from me, and she's like, "What's up with Julian? Where is he?" My wife was like, he's in his studio. And like 4 in the morning, I'd be walking out of my bed like a zombie. And my wife's like, "Where you going, honey?" And I'm like, "I gotta pay my painting." She's like, "Are you all right? Are you feeling okay?" And I'm like, I didn't know what all right was or okay. I was consumed. And I worked night and day on a very difficult painting, a very challenging, massive project. And I worked until I got it to a place where I was like, wow, I think that I'm done. Painting's never done, but it was obviously as done as I could have at that time. But that was now September of 2015. At that time, there were 17 candidates for president from the Republican Party, and I think 5 from the Democrat Party, all running at that time. Most people thought it was a joke. First people I showed the painting to thought it was a joke. They laughed. They said, "This guy, I can't vote for this guy, blah, blah, blah." And I said, "No, he's going to become president." They all thought I was nuts. They laughed at me. And that laughter and that mockery continued. Now, I'll stop there, no, because that's a very important beginning to this journey. There's a whole story that follows that of a campaign. I campaigned across the country. I meet Donald Trump. I mean, there's a whole bunch of really cool stuff that happens. And then after doing that, and the work was seen from New York to LA, a major art show, it was shown with the Obama Hope poster that I talked about by the inspiration and patron of that work of art. He had a massive political art show in Pasadena and Los Angeles. He invited me, brought the painting. It was a major show. It was with all the nation's top political artists, and there was my massive 7 by 15-foot painting, 102 square feet. And it was hated on like you can't believe. It was basically a hate on Trump show. And most of my journey as an artist has been just one of hatred. And back then, you see, right now it's all like on the other side, and everyone's doing, it's like the thing to do. Back then, it was everyone was against everyone, everyone. There was even another artist there whose name is Sabo from California. He's a well-known political artist. All he had was anti-Trump stuff up, all in mockery and ridicule. And he eventually, got his artwork and changed that quick, because it became popular to support him in one sense, in one way, years later. So this was very early and life-changing experience. It was shown at the RNC, the Republican National Convention in Cleveland, Ohio, in 2016. So it had a lot of exposure, and it was a great journey. And so when he won, I wasn't surprised. That night I was really nervous because I'd never gone through anything like this before in my life.
Yeah.
But then I'm sitting up at the first time, it's like 1 in the morning, and sitting with most people had gone home. I'm sitting there with a few people in this bar, and he's like, "He wins," and I'm like, "Yeah, there you go." And they're like, "Oh, you were right all along, Raven. You weren't nuts after all." So the people who were screaming and yelling, they stopped screaming and yelling, other than screaming and yelling because he won. So it was really something. But then the question became, what do I do now after he won? And I had met people along the journey across the country, had seen this portrait, and they'd say to me, "Oh, this should be in the Smithsonian." And I didn't really know what that meant. I'm a foreigner. I had heard of the Smithsonian, never been there. So I did the research, and sure enough, there's a national portrait gallery, Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery. And I was like, wow, look at this. So I do the research, and wow, look at this. 2009, January, they showed the Obama Hope poster as a tribute to incoming Barack Obama, the president, this historic win of this candidate. Again, this whole historic campaign of Barack Obama, and 2013. So it was shown, big art celebrations in the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery, big shindig, you can imagine. It was a big deal. So I then say, I'm going to apply to the Smithsonian. That's what I'm going to do. And I had lots of support from political leaders across the state of New York. I'd met a lot of people on my journey, from the mayor of my town, local congressman, senator, assemblyman, art collectors, a radio host. So I had a councilwoman. I had about 200,000 people, representatives of supporting with letters of recommendation. This should be considered. This should be shown. This should be all backing this public application to show my, and I wasn't trying to give it to them. I didn't want them to, I wanted to lend it for the inauguration, and then they would just give it back 3 months or 60 or 90 days. And I wrote this massive application. There's a whole other part of that story that is in the book again that if you want to find out, you need to read it. This just, it's unbelievable what I had to go through to do this. A local museum and how the bias that I was already experiencing was unbelievable. And then the application landed on the desk of a woman by the name of Kim Sayet, the director of the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery. And I called up the next morning, and I'm a very forthright person. I was like wanting to speak to her, but I got the secretary, and I'm like, my name's Julian Raven. The application was forwarded last night by this director, another museum, Smithsonian director. I'm calling, I'm introducing myself. Here's my phone number. If I can do anything, I would like, what I was just showing good faith, wanting to present, myself, answer any questions they might have. She's like, well, the director's not in today, but I'm sure she'll get back to you or someone will, type of thing. And 15 minutes later, I get a phone call, and it's from the same DC phone number. And guess who it is?
It was her, Kim.
Kim Sayet, and she's Australian. So this woman, I had no idea, in this Australian accent, very snooty, and she immediately starts to disparage the work. And the whole conversation it turns into an 11-minute argument where she invents and creates arbitrary, personal, biased reasons why the painting should not be included. And I challenged each and every one of them. I rebutted each and every one of them until she says this. She goes, she says this is what's amazing. She says to me, it's not from life, she says. In other words, you know what that means when a portrait's not from life?
Not exactly. It's not authentic, I would say.
Painted in person. When a painter and a portrait, if I sit and paint directly from you, the subject in your space or in my studio, it's a portrait from life. Portraits from photographs are not portraits from life. So she makes this, and I say to her, I said, the Obama Hope portrait was a photoshopped photograph. It was not even a painting, and it was not from life. It was a Photoshop of a photograph from the internet. At that point, she raises her voice. She starts like shrilling. It was unbelievable. I'm really quite shocked at this point. So I fast forward in this dialogue now. She gets to one of her biggest objections. She says, it's too political. And I said, it's too political. I said, you've shown the political campaign poster for Barack Obama. Not just once, you showed it in two inaugurations. And you're saying my painting is too political? And the conversation ends like this. She raises her voice and she says, I'm the director of the National Portrait Gallery. Your application will go no further. You can appeal it all you want. And she hangs up and leaves me absolutely stunned. So that began the journey of my battle against the Smithsonian Institution. There's a lot to it. That is December of 2016, December 1st. So it's a long time ago. A lot has happened since then. And in the time we have, I'm not going to go. I'm going to say to you and your audience, if you want to read that whole story in detail, this is the way to do it. You check out the book, because the book is a full detailed expose of that. But the most important point that we get to in this story is about the Smithsonian Institution. Something, like I said, I didn't know anything about. I'm an immigrant. And then I find out something that most Americans don't know anything about, other than they know the name, and a lot of them have been there as a child. They were taken by their parents and sort of walked through the Space Museum or this. And the Smithsonian is a massive part of American heritage and culture and identity and memory. It is the most significant and well-respected American storytelling engine that America has. So this person is one of these, like, I would call her like a pirate who has hijacked her her museum, because in her world it's not getting in because I hate Donald Trump. It had nothing to do with the painting qualifying. She had to make up reasons why it didn't. And it was shocking, to be honest with you. It was absolutely shocking, the treatment that I got. And so her words to me, "You can appeal it all you want," was like a taunt. She taunted me, she provoked me, and she challenged me. And I did. And I appealed it, and I filed lawsuits, and I've been suing them for 10 years. I'm in my third lawsuit against them. And this, I think, is what is most important for you and your listeners. When I'm going to ask you, Noah, what is the Smithsonian Institution? What is it and who owns it?
I am not I'm not in too into the Smithsonian. I'm like you, I've heard about the Smithsonian, I've heard about what it is, how it showcases art and showcases all these prolific historical things, and it was it's like a national museum. Um,
Right, but let me stop you there when you say National Museum. See, that is where the confusion starts. And what I will say, what is a national museum to you?
to me it would be work taken from different parts of the well, now now I'm having to think about words. I would say that it's more art from different parts of the country that are put into one museum, but then I'm like, I wonder if I mean like world.
Well, let me ask you
Honestly,
this. Let me ask you about. I'm more trying to get at ownership. Who do you think owns it?
that I have no clue.
Okay, who do you think owns it? Take a guess.
I would say I feel like the government would own it since it's
Right.
like a
Well, that is the prevailing opinion, but it's wrong, and That's why it's called the Smithsonian National Portrait. It's not called the National Portrait Gallery. It's called the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery, and the word Smithsonian comes from the name James Smithson, who was an Englishman like myself, who never came to America, who had willed his fortune. He was the child, he was a bastard child of two British royal lineages. He was born in disrepute in Paris because he couldn't grow up in England because he was a bastard under Victorian law. He was conceived out of wedlock, and then he died in Italy. So he was a persona non grata in England. He willed his money to his few family members. He never married or had children. And if in his will he said if they couldn't receive his money, then he would give the whole bequest, his whole estate to the United States, that at Washington, D.C., they would establish the Smithsonian Institution, an institution for the increase and diffusion of knowledge. So the Smithsonian Institution is basically a private charity. That's all it is. You've got charities wherever you go in this world where wealthy people they donate their possessions, they donate their estate to a public cause. They give their money, their home, their land, and they give it over to a trustee to take. Like it's like a church in the sense of a non-profit. It's a non-profit, privately funded charity. That's what it was, and he gave it to the United States, and Congress accepted the responsibility to be the trustee of his institution, his museum. If you go to my website, which is www.smithsoninstitution.com, not Smithsonian, smithsoninstitution.com, right down the front page, you'll see newspaper cuttings from newspapers from Washington, D.C. from the beginning of the last century in the 1900s, late 1800s. And there's a story, the first story, it's a great story because it describes like what you just said right now. It describes people arriving from the Midwest and walking into on the mall in Washington, seeing the Smithsonian buildings, and immediately assuming that it was the government. They immediately assume that, and that's what the article says. But then they find out it's not the government; it's a public, private charity devoted to a public cause. If you understand what I mean.
yeah, a couple of things that I kind of wanted to back up on is like I want people to know that the image that he's painted, I gotta say, it's a beautiful painting. It is absolutely beautiful. And for people that don't know what it looks like, it's essentially on the left side of the painting, it's a portrait of Trump. It's like a kind of a detailed up close, kind of as like a professional shot of his face. and the rest of it shows kind of a bald eagle that is carrying a American flag by its claws, and then it's kind of got like a kind of a geographic look of the United States,
And the
but it's
world,
kind
yeah.
of like in but it
Yeah,
uses like color of like what you would see on the globe. That's
right.
literally what the picture is all about. Now, I don't see why they claimed it as being too political because it's not really saying like a message on there. I would get it if it had like some kind of message. I would get that, but it's literally symbols that have at that point had been part of our country for years. An American flag, a
You should
bald
have
eagle.
you should have had the job, Noah. You should have had a job. That's exactly the point. That's exactly it. Her objections were arbitrary. They were made up. It's complete nonsense. And so that's why I sued them, because she had to create objections that in her mind justified her rejecting the painting. And when you this is what the Smithsonian Institution is. Like I said, in the law, it's a private charity, but you know who runs the Smithsonian? There's a government appointed board that runs the Smithsonian. So the government has a role in operating the Smithsonian Institution as a trustee. You see what I'm saying? They it's like a hand inside of a glove. The Smithsonian's like the glove, and the government's got the hand inside the glove, and it makes the glove move. See what I'm saying? And
Mhm.
so when the government runs anything or has anything to do with the operation of an institution of any type, they cannot discriminate between viewpoints. So there's this if the government says it's too political, that's immediately a violation of my First Amendment free speech rights, because they've already shown political art. If they had never shown political artwork, the government could say, we don't show political artwork here. And then they'd have to justify why my painting was political. My painting is patriotic. It's symbolically patriotic, as you see. There's
Mhm.
really nothing political about it in that sense. It's patriotic. They're American symbols. So they would have to say, well, we don't accept American patriotic paintings, and we've never accepted them. And if that was the case and that was their practice, then it would be legitimate. But the whole point is that she had shown the political campaign poster of Barack Obama for 2013, and they had massive exhibitions of all of these pictures, and especially the one Obama Hope poster, which was his theme, his campaign theme, the Obama Hope campaign. That hope and change was his political message. So it was as political as you can get. And so the minute the government shows any political posture from the public, it cannot discriminate against any other political viewpoint. It has to show it. It has to. They can't say it's too political. It just violates. So they trampled on my rights. And the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., it exercises so much power and prestige because guess who sits on the Board of Regents that's appointed by Congress? Any ideas?
I don't think I have an idea.
All right. Well, the Board of Regents is the director of the Board of Regents. The chancellor is John Roberts, the Supreme Court Chief Justice. On the Board of Regents sits the Vice President, J.D. Vance. On the Board of Regents sits 3 members of Congress, 3 members of the Senate, and 9 members of the public, unelected members of the public. It's like the board of a church. You ever seen a governing board of a church or an organization that are trustees?
I think I have.
Well, let's say this. Say you're a doctor or a lawyer or a judge or a politician or anybody of importance. When you're invited to be on the board of, let's say, Cornell University, they invite you to sit on the board. When you go and sit on the board as a trustee, you don't go there as a judge. You don't go there as a general because that was your title in the army. You go there as Noah, the citizen who happens to be a judge, but you sit down at that table as a citizen. That's what a trustee does. You don't carry your oath. So all of these government officials that sit at the board of the Smithsonian, they're just citizens. They're not sitting there because they're the chief justice. Because if it was, and this is where the fascinating part of my story gets into the legal aspect, how familiar are you with the separation of powers, the doctrine of the separate? You familiar with the three branches of government?
I am, and I've got I know it's ju
Judicial
e- yeah, judicial, executive,
and the legislative.
legislative. Yeah.
Right. So you got the Supreme Court, you have Congress, and you have the White House. And the government was split in three pieces, co-equal pieces of the government that they operate independently, interdependently, but they're independent. They do their own thing, and they all check and balance. They all sort of counterbalance each other. But that was the intention anyway. So the Board of Regents is a private charity with just members of the government sitting on the board. It's not a government agency. But this is the thing that's amazing, and this is where the story may be interesting to you and your listeners, because this is American heritage. This is the heritage of the American citizen. The Smithsonian was given to the American people. It was given to us. And when it gets hijacked by political activists who in that museum has been overtaken by political activists, they have used their position of authority to enforce their worldview and to ban and to silence people like me because they just can't stand what I believe, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's been hijacked. There's no doubt about it. Now, in my lawsuit that went all the way to the Supreme Court, but guess what? They didn't want to hear it when it got there. And the Chief Justice had to recuse himself. Why? Because he's a defendant in the case and he sits on the board of the Smithsonian. But you know what my lawsuit was asking?
What was it asking?
What is the Smithsonian? Because nobody has any clue. Everybody is so confused about the legal entity status of the Smithsonian Institution. What is the Smithsonian? Is it a government agency like you thought it was? Like 99% of the people I've spoken to in 10 years, 99% of them think it's the government and a government agency, but it's not. And when I saw the title of your podcast and you were like a truth seeker and you're like you want to speak the truth and know the hard truths, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is one of them. This is one of them that's critical to the American citizen because if not, basically it's been hijacked and taken away from the people it was given to. You understand?
I
And and then
completely understand.
and then our rights are trampled on because this is what happened in the court. The judge, in order to deprive me of my First Amendment free speech rights, in order to silence me, he made up a ruling. He basically created it out of thin air. And he said, no, like you said, he said the government, the Smithsonian is the government through and through. That's what he ruled.
So, during this whole thing, people don't know that this has been a everlasting legal battle, and I would assume it's still kind of ongoing. It's been covered by multiple stations, and I just want people to know this is who's all covered this story. This is not his first time this story's been told. It's been told on countless resources. ABC News, Fox News, New York Times, CNN, Washington Times, The Washington Post, NPR, The Guardian, Daily Mail, as well as international outlets in multiple countries. Time Magazine said a story on it, the U.S. Sun, and there's been a lot more than that. Do you see any? And I've got to say, for her, I pulled up a picture of what she looked like. It's given so Karen. It's like Karen energy from the hairstyle. I mean,
You
if
funny,
there
but
was a definition, if there was a picture of Karen, like a Karen definition, this would literally, she nails it to a T,
you're
nails it to a T.
funny, but the Kim Say It story. This is what happens. So that's in 2015. I sued her twice because later she blocks me on Twitter, formerly X, which is formerly Twitter, sue her again.
Uh,
And now I'm in my third lawsuit. But my third lawsuit is because, do you know what happened this year with the Smithsonian once Trump had been reelected? May the 30th, 2025, he fires Kim Sayed. He fires her and he says, on the list of 17 reasons, my case is number 4. So the Washington Post writes this big article, Raven, they do this big thing, it's a big story. And my case, this whole story I'm telling you, is number 4 on the president's list of reasons to fire Kim Sayed. But the problem is the president can't fire Kim Sayed because guess what?
it's not government owned.
It's not government. It's like him trying to fire a pastor of a church. It's like, and this is a
Mm.
typical thing the president does. Now for you and yours, you know, I'm suing the president right now as well because of what he's doing. Because the president now is trying to control the subject matter of the Smithsonian Institution with executive orders, and it's a private charity. He has no business. His idea may be right, and I agree wholeheartedly. And say, well, I agree with your sentiments, but the Smithsonian is private. That's the whole point of the journey. That's the whole point of my story. Get the government out. This is a private charity. And the way that the president, and then this is my whole new lawsuit, is pushing for what's called a declaration by either the appeals court or the Supreme Court. Once again, the same question I asked in 2019. What is the Smithsonian? They have my case is the only case that has ever gone to the Supreme Court against the Smithsonian Institution. It's the only case that has brought these issues to the level that they've brought. And each time it's got there, they've refused to answer the question. They've refused to do it. But now, what happened in May and June of this year when the president tried to fire Kim Sayed, you know what she did the next day?
I think when I was looking, didn't she resign?
No,
Or
she went back to work the next day. So and then the Smithsonian has a public meeting. I go down there that day. They do another story on my story in the Washington Post. The Smithsonian has their Board of Regents meeting, and guess who's in the meeting? The Chief Justice, Vice President J.D. Vance, members of Congress. They're in this meeting, and you know what they say at the end of the meeting? The Smithsonian is in charge of hiring and firing. They didn't rebuke the president directly, but they indirectly rebuked the vice president sitting on the board. There was a congressman banging the table. It was reported in the New York Times, basically banging on the table saying the president says to fire her, and the Chief Justice says, go jump off a cliff. He rebuked basically the member of Congress. This is all in the New York Times. So it proved the Smithsonian came out with a statement that they are an independent entity. They are not the government. They said it themselves. But when they argued their case in court, you know what they said? They are the government. Yeah. And that's this Cerberus creature on the front of my book here, if you can see it. Do you see that? Odious
yes,
and Cerberus, the three-headed Greek hellhound. This is the problem. The institution is private. It's like a church. It's like a charity. It's the people that work there. They are government employees because the government has ran the charity, but it's a private charity. And because of the connection with the government, it has been treated like a government agency because no one's ever said to them, you need to stop because this is private. And that's why what the president's doing, as much as it's meritorious sociologically and and politically, he has no right to meddle with the Smithsonian content whatsoever. There are other ways that the Smithsonian needs to correct the way that it's being operated. There are other ways to do it, and that's why he's now a defendant in my current lawsuit because it's like saying at some point the judge it's the Supreme Court. Hopefully, they have to say, listen, this is what the Smithsonian is. The president can't do this. They can't. There's Kim Sayed couldn't do this to Mr. Raven. It's a private charity run by the government. That's it. The government is just a trustee. It has there is no government purpose in the Smithsonian Institution. It is purely private. It operates under the will of an Englishman by the name of James Smithson. That's what controls the Smithsonian, not the government, not the president, not Congress. It's the will of James Smithson. That's what controls it. And so I'm going to stop it there for you because there's a lot, and I want to encourage your listeners. There are videos, there are lots of these different interviews out there that I've done about it. That if you just Google, if you go to the website smithsoninstitution.com, you'll find other podcasts as well, and you'll find the book. The book's the best resource because it's documented. It's like a research novel and it's a non-fiction. It's written as if it was an allegory and an adventure, a mountain climbing adventure. And as it's going through this allegorical tale, it's also dealing with all of the history and the law and the facts about the truth. And again, going back to the description of your podcast, you seem to be someone who was interested in knowing those things. Those, what is the truth? What is the Smithsonian? That's the question. What, and people refuse. They refuse. They want to pretend that and it's not. It's not the government. And maybe this time, because I have this new case that's been going through the courts, maybe this time, finally, a judge is going to say, we actually need to do the deep dive and correct the record and declare that the Smithsonian is just a private charity. That's all it is. And the government has no business trying to control what's going on inside the Smithsonian.
Yeah, this has been such an impactful story. This, as much detail as we have really discussed, this was essentially just scratching the surface of this long story about what he's had to go through. Um, it for me, this is why I like doing the podcast. It's Yes, I know that people listen to it for the mental health stories, they listen to the depression, anxiety, and suicide stories. But I also love doing stories like this because it's someone telling their story of what actually has happened. It is a way to get some of the truth out and kind of brings people's attention to that. Like, I know that I've had people talk about marijuana use on here that had their love for it. I've had mediums, I've had psychics and all this stuff. And this is why I like this podcast. I don't put like a label on it like, yes, I just want mental health patients. It's diverse. I have a diverse group of guests have come on here and have shared true stories like this. And this story has not been manipulated in any way. I mean, you can look at countless articles from it. You can look online. You can find it. Everything he's saying is true, and it's been very impactful. And yes, honestly, highly recommend people to read the book, as you'll get the full story. As we only have an hour today, I wish we had 2 or 3 hours so we could unravel this whole story. But um, Julian, it was an honor to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for coming on here and sharing sharing your story with my audience, and maybe it'll bring some discussions in there involved. As I said with the picture, I think it's a beautiful painting. I mean, I think it's absolutely beautiful. I know I can't draw a stick figure. So anything above a stick figure to me is artistic, should be hung up in a museum. So, but I mean, it it's a really beautiful painting, and I hate that it's gotten so much ridicule for just because of who's on the picture. I mean, for
Yeah,
this.
it's a strange journey, and I think it'll have its time in due time when the time is right.
Well, Julian, I appreciate you so much for coming on. I'll put his website down. I'll put the website down there in the description so that if you would like to learn more about this story and would like to maybe check more of his platforms out, that website link will be down there for you guys to find so that it'll be easy access for you guys. Feel free to follow the podcast on social media, Instagram and TikTok at Lethal Venom Podcast, as well as Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Noah's Podcast. And as always, listen to Lethal Venom wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm on all the major platforms: Spotify, Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Pandora. It is everywhere, so feel free to subscribe so you get notified of when new episodes like this are dropped, and as well as others in the future. Thank you all for tuning in today's episode. Hope y'all really enjoyed it. Be safe out there. I hope y'all all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see y'all in the next episode of Lethal Venom.